All right, let's dive straight away now. Most times, coping with the aftermath of a war may be as devastating as prosecuting the war itself. One of the sectors hardest hit in the global COVID-19 pandemic is the aviation sector. The lockdown and closure of borders imposed by the global community to curb the spread of the virus has sent many airlines out of business. Nigeria's Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, says the sector has been the worst hit since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country, having lost about 24 billion naira. This due to the closure of the airports. Let's hear from the minister.
We are worse hit than any other sector. Some 17 billion monthly is being lost by the airlines thanks to COVID-19. The sector is highly regulated and very coordinated and has set standards that must be followed at all times, regardless, because we speak to safety. So safety, security, and efficiency of the sector is extremely important regardless of what is going on. We will not be able to just open up after closing for several weeks and perhaps for some months. So those airplanes have been kept. When we are going to bring them back into service, we will ensure that they are airworthy and that they can make those flights and safely. Based on what we have, the trend of events prior to COVID-19, the total loss is about 21 billion naira, approximately, plus about 3 billion naira tangentially. And this is divided in this form: 7 billion for aviation agencies, what they lose in a month; 10 billion for airline, and 4 billion for ground handling, catering, etc. And then the tangential 3 billion. Then also, just since you're interested in dollars, I've got from IATA here an information from IATA Economics. IATA is the International Airline Transport Association, and they've given us impact or economic impact in Africa's largest aviation markets. That for Nigeria, lost airline revenue, this time around only airline revenue, is $994 million. And in terms of employment at risk, in Nigeria is 125,370. Loss of contribution to the GDP of the country is $885 million. Now these are IATA figures. And finally, to say that because it is service nature, service industry, it's not like Honorable Emeka Nwajibo's shop in Aba, which I know he has. If he is not able to sell his spare parts, they are there. It means it's only a delayed income, so to speak. But because the airline is service thing, I have not provided the service. I am able to do so. You have not flown, so I've lost it. I cannot regain it. I cannot sell it tomorrow. The one I sell is tomorrow, is meant for tomorrow, and there's no way I can come back up with it. So this is the situation of civil aviation. It's really a pathetic one. We're all crying, and I can guarantee you several airlines are not going to come out of this, unfortunately.
Minister of Aviation Hadi Sirika, they're giving more background to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the aviation sector in Nigeria. He's also, backed with relevant information from the IATA. Let me bring in my guest at this point now. Welcome, Babajide. Thank you very much for joining in at this time. And of course, Solomon Ajuziogu, it's good to have you both on the show. Just before we do justice to this topic now, let's take a quick break. We'll be back. Stay with us. Thanks a lot for staying with us on Journalists Hangout. So as the discussion commences now, the Minister of Aviation has warned BKO that the aviation sector or certain companies or many companies may not survive post-pandemic, looking at the impacts the industry is particularly getting at this time.
Yes, that's a fact, and Nigeria is not the only country where the aviation sector is facing serious problems at this time. In fact, it's projected that some of the airlines in Europe and America may not recover until 1 year after this whole thing comes to an end. Because, you see, it's inevitable for air travel to be banned. One, the greatest way that this can be spread is air travel, as we have seen. Many people traveled to watch Champions League games and came back infected, or they infected other people. The index case in our country came in by air. The nature of air travel is such that the airplane is airtight, and the tighter the air in the environment, the more difficult, the more easy it is for the disease to spread. For example, if someone sneezes inside an aircraft, many people in that aircraft are going to be in danger of being infected if that person is a carrier of the virus, because in any case, social distancing is not practiced on board. You have your ticket which entitles you to a seat. So if you are allocated a seat behind someone who had contracted the virus, there is no means by which you know. And if that person sneezes, because the aircraft is airtight, you all stand the risk of being infected. So what most countries quickly did was to say, okay, let's stop air travel. Because you even go to airports, you see huge crowds and all that. And then inside the aircraft itself, people stand the risk of being infected because it is airtight, and whatever happens on board, you are really at risk. So it is inevitable that these steps had to be taken. So when the minister said the aviation sector is the worst affected, I have no reason to doubt what he said, because these people earn their revenue from flight operations. And if they cannot fly, if the airplanes can't fly, how does the revenue come in? Look at FAN, for example, Federal Aviation Authority of Nigeria. This is a government agency with an overhead of 4 billion a month. And for more than a month now, they've not worked. So how does government even pay their salary unless the agency is supported?
So it indeed cuts across agencies.
Agencies will be affected.
Airlines.
Yes, the companies that provide catering services
Absolutely.
will be affected. Those the ground handling companies, they will be affected.
Absolutely.
The airlines, now smarting from the ill effects of this pandemic, they have already, the Nigerian airlines, they have sent 80% of their staff on compulsory leave without pay. The ones who had not been sent on compulsory leave without pay have been made to take massive pay cuts. So when the minister says, oh, about 127,305 people could be affected by job losses, it shows the extent to which this pandemic has done so much damage to that sector. Even remember what the CEO of Airbus said 2 weeks ago, that look, we are hemorrhaging money, we are spending money where we are not making money, that if care is not taken, it will be difficult for them to survive, because they must pay for leases. A lot of the aircraft are Air Nigeria on leases. They must service their debt, because they are owing the local airlines are owing the Nigerian banking sector collectively about 1 trillion. How do they service those debts when they can't make money?
So many questions now, so many worries. Even before the pandemic, hit this hard in the country, many operators in the country had already, been worried about the impact that the sector would, suffer. And indeed, we are seeing it playing out. The numbers are there and all that. And even when the pandemic is over, we've seen the move the government has made now. The new normal, so to speak, is also likely to be the case now, even when the airplanes start to fly again. Of course, for now, it's still essential services that we see over the skies there. But for you, people have said, okay, it has happened, but what kind of intervention should the federal government be giving to this sector, seeing as it's, the most spread and it's also the most hit?
Well, naturally, you would expect that since not many people travel by sea these days, that aviation, traveling by air, becomes is the most predominant. It's the easiest, probably the cheapest, as it seems, in this case. And it was only natural that airlines move people, people move the virus. So you understand that the virus breaks out in a place like Wuhan, and then maybe like 8,000 miles away in the US, you have it all over the place, and so it had to be stopped. So that movement had to be stopped, basically. But one of the things you would expect government at this is where government intervention will not just stop at trying to contain the disease, because this is a component of the virus, economic. Aviation is just one sector of the economy, and it's capital intensive, it's high tech. If you do not want the job losses, if you have to save the airlines, the companies, then you have to give them a bailout, because that's the most reasonable thing to do at this time. When the world entered into a recession, because we're hitting another recession, naturally, you have to give the companies bailout to keep them afloat so that that sector does not collapse. If it collapses, you can see the supporting cast of the aviation industry. There's so many things attached to it. It has to be a bailout. That's the intervention. And the people in the aviation sector and government will now have to sit down and work out the modalities for this bailout. That's the way they have to go. We don't have a choice. It's not just the aviation sector that you're going to do this for. You're going to have a lot of consideration for the economy generally.
Absolutely, and it's the fastest growing sector or subsector in the economy. So proponents have said this, but then other people have also said, let the government do a bailout for its agencies and not the airlines, since these airlines are largely, private run. So where do you stand in this debate, Speaker?
I disagree. When America ran into a recession in 2008, Obama was coming in as a new president. He had to give a bailout to the companies. And some of those companies were not even owned by the state. The AIGs of this world, if you remember, even the automobile companies in Detroit, they all were in distress. The airlines in America after 9/11 were in distress because people were scared to fly. Air travel went down, seriously. And then government needed to give them a bailout. So when you give them the bailout, you are helping the entire economy, because the contribution of the aviation sector to the GDP will grow rather than decline.
All right, kindly hold that thought. Now let's bring in Abubakar joining us from Kebbi State. Good evening. Good evening, Abubakar. Hello. Let's have your contribution. You're live.
Yes, I support the issue of stopping the airline from moving from one country to another, because if you look at it in the whole world, it is the air flight that causes the virus to spread all over the country. If you look at it very well, the virus started from Wuhan, which is China. And if there is no way, if you ask question why the virus traveled to, no, it is airline that travels those things to another country. So it is, we must bear in mind that we must stop the airline, even if it may stop completely to take 1 or more years before recovering. I think that should be the only way out. But if you allow it to continue, definitely the virus will continue and we will all die if care is not taken. God bless you.
Thank you very much, and amen to your prayers. So just what kind of bailout do you advocate?
The bailout will be financial in nature because they've not had enough to meet their obligations to workers, obligations to creditors, obligation to people involved in the value chain. So they really would need to be bailed out. You as you spend money and you are not earning enough, you go into what is called illiquidity. And illiquidity is the biggest killer of businesses. So you have to help them shore up their liquidity by giving them that bailout. When you give them that bailout, you will be able to save jobs. You will be able to keep the sector afloat. Because if you look at the figures, by the end of 2018, it was the second fastest growing sector in the Nigerian economy. Then when we ended 2019, the last quarter, it became the fastest growing. They know that Nigerians travel a lot. We are cosmopolitan people. You see airlines, their landings, airlines from UAE, for example, do multiple landings in Nigeria because Nigerians travel a lot to the UAE to do business and other things. It's just like the Americans. The Americans travel a lot of them, and the people who travel so much in America are the New Yorkers. They travel not just as tourists, but people who want to do business. That's why that part of the country is the worst hit. So the truth is, we must find a bailout. Ajuziogu has suggested what he called payroll support. So you could also do payroll support for some of these airlines because
for their staff.
Yes, once they come back, the payroll support will enable them be able to keep some of these workers, be able to pay them their wages so that we do not, already the problem of unemployment in our country is grave. Just like we have in South Africa, we are 30%, the unemployment rate is about 30% in South Africa. They already even moved into recession before this lockdown came. So we know that recession is inevitable, but as they always say, we must spend ourselves out of recession by spending money on infrastructure, and then companies that need to be bailed out, we have to bail them out so that they can continue to contribute positively to the growth of our GDP. And
with this bailout now, would there be, stronger hope now for those who have already been laid off? Because concerns have also been, why will the government bail out a company, an airline, for instance, and then the airline will still go on, to lay off? Because looking at the suggestion that Babajide just gave us now, would we have a bailout that will be specific and will give such terms now to airlines to abide by?
Well, in doing this, in giving a bailout, government will be pursuing what you call public interest. It's for the interest of the good of all. And government, in looking out for the people, will look at the interest of the employees, will look at the interest of Nigeria, will look at the interest, of everybody involved, basically. Now, the whole idea why people spoke against bailing out private companies, as it were, is more like when this recession happened in 2008, it wasn't because of a force majeure of this nature. It was because the CEOs, the directors, the managers of these companies were accused of mismanaging the economy, mismanaging the businesses. But that's not the situation here. Right. This is a force majeure. This is something that is beyond everybody's control. Now, the point is government really has to do this to. There are many ways, there are many forms in which this bailout could be given. Terms and conditions would apply. It could be credit facility. It's not like you're giving them money that they're not going to pay you back. but it is the sort of financial bailout that will require them to be able to keep the staffers, to keep the employment rate higher, to maintain that, and then it could be spelled out in such a way that companies, it's a credit facility basically, so it's not something that they won't pay back. And then you probably be looking at a tax holiday even after giving them all of this. The thing is, even when you give them the bailout, you may not be able to give them everything they need. So certainly there will be certain considerations of whether a particular percentage of the workers will continue, a particular percentage will be laid off, or the salaries will have to be reduced, or some of the things you have to do.
And
it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot.
It's not just
so
for
it's
the
not
operators.
just about throwing money at it. It's about planning to bail them out.
All right, that will be on the side now, but still to come on the show, Kano State Government, NCDC officials battle hard against coronavirus as the WHO deploys additional personnel to support COVID-19 response in the state. Stay with us. Watching Journalists Hangout, and we thank you very much for being there with us. As Nigeria battles COVID-19 head-on, the Kano conundrum is presenting the biggest challenge, where apart from an explosion in the number of confirmed cases of the deadly virus in the past 2 weeks, the mystery deaths claiming many lives in the state is yet to be resolved. But officials of the Kano State Government and the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, the NCDC, are battling hard to halt the spread of the coronavirus, and the efforts are yielding results. Now the World Health Organization, WHO, has deployed a rapid response team to support the COVID-19 response in the state. Let's get more about the struggle to curb the pandemic from TVC News correspondent in Kano, Ibrahim Issa.
The apprehension that has seized residents of Kano State, which is now the epicenter of the coronavirus crisis in the north, is gradually easing. This is due to the proactive measures taken in recent days, which seems to be yielding results. The state government announced the discharge of 3 COVID-19 patients after testing negative twice. The government says more tests will be carried out on more cases, and more of them will be discharged soon.
Happy to notice that the team from Abuja is planning together with our team, is mobilizing together with our team, and is executing all the programs with our team.
Any moment from now, we are going to begin to discharge our clients. I call them clients because we give them services. So any moment from now, we are discharging at least 2-3 cases out of isolation, which is the first of such discharges.
Kano State has been on total lockdown imposed by the president for 2 weeks, with markets remaining closed. Traders in the state have since resorted to holding and hiking prices of the essential commodities. Residents are relieved that the State Public Complaints and Anti-Corruption Commission has decided to intervene in the situation.
One important issue and the good news is that as it stands today, I was informed by both our sources and the traders that today the price of cigar, which sugar hitherto was 26,000, today is being sold as 18,000, as according to what we had. So it's something that we have achieved, and it's something that I think is the overall objective of what we are trying to achieve.
Kano now has 3 active COVID-19 testing centers, with the latest established by the Aliko Dangote Foundation and inaugurated by Governor Abdullahi Ganduje and Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, Chukwe Ihekwezu. With that, more tests can now be carried out in the state, where there is now community transmission. The government says more tests would be carried out at the isolation centers, and by implication, more patients will be discharged in earnest.
All right, Ibrahim Issa there, correspondent, giving us updates on the situation of COVID-19 in the states. Gentlemen, are you satisfied with the progress being made? BKO, for you, are these efforts really yielding results?
Oh, it's a good thing to hear that these efforts are being made. some weeks ago, we didn't see this kind of efforts being made, but we pleaded that Kano needed help and that Nigeria should deploy all the resources at its disposal to help Kano, because those deaths were happening, and some of us suspect, and still suspect, that they were COVID-19 related. Where you do not or did not carry out an autopsy, it's difficult to say, oh, it is COVID-19 or it is not COVID-19. Even in America, many people died without being tested. So they would, in the records, they will be listed among people who are killed by pneumonia and all that. But the truth is, we just have to find a way to stop the huge number of people dying in Kano. And it's good to hear that the World Health Organization has sent in more men to the area. Dangote has intervened once again.
Indeed.
With helping to ramp up testing, which is important in defeating the pandemic. There was a time that for days, no test was carried out in Kano, because the NCDC officials said they were going to fumigate the test center. And then for this, no test of any sort. And it coincided with the period when we had reports of
deaths.
Yes. And then even the security agencies are arresting people now who are breaching the social distancing protocol and behaving as if government didn't know what it was doing when it decided to impose a lockdown. So it's good to see the governor talk about how they are working with Abuja now to try and solve the problem. It's good to see the DG of the NCDC physically on ground to look at the materials and men that Kano has at this time to try and defeat this pandemic. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint. There are still many days to go, but it's a good thing that they are beginning to get it right. And if this is sustained, if we ramp up testing in Kano, if we get more aggressive, the kind of aggression that we didn't see in the early days, then we will be able to bring down the number of new cases in Kano, and that will be the first step to defeating.
Absolutely. 427 cases as at now. We recall that the index case was, confirmed like April the 11th or thereabout. Solomon, there are still lingering concerns, because as we have seen and as we've heard on this table now, the concern still remains capacity building that will aid the testing capacity in the state. For you now, what more should be done to leverage the progress the state is making at this time?
Well, there's the saying that one of the ways you know a man, in those days when we were in school, or in primary school or secondary school, is when you are flogged, when you are given several strokes of the cane, and then you shake it off and you don't cry, even though you can feel the pain, even when you need to cry. So you just eat it up and you're like, okay, you're a man. But there are some things that are beyond you that even as a man, you need to cry, okay? In Italy, when the situation in Italy got so bad, the Prime Minister was close to tears. He cried out. He said they were helpless. He had to appeal to a divine, he had to appeal for divine help anywhere it could come from, because it was a bad situation. I guess that the governor in Kano, the authorities in Kano, and the people in Kano probably now realize that there is no bravery in trying to paper over what is obviously
Cry
wrong.
out for help.
Exactly. And so they have cried out for help. We have also appealed on their behalf, and then we see the ramping up. Now, my worry is how far and how deep the transmissions have run in within the period of recklessness. That is the only state, if I stand to be corrected, where people came out to protest. That there was nothing like coronavirus.
They protested in Plateau too.
Okay, so, but Kano was the first place where people came out in such huge number. Now, but what I'm trying to say is this. Now, I do not know how deep this has run. Now, within these 2 weeks of the lockdown, which we almost have 1 week gone, how far, how quickly, how vigorous could the NCDC, with the help of the WHO and the local hands in Kano, how quickly can they do all the contact tracing? Because the fear was that the cluster in which Kano people lived was going to make this a very bad situation if it gets to Kano. And of course, we've seen how these things have been happening. So the thing is this, with all those hands, we probably need to bring in more personnel. We really need to expand the capacity for testing. We've tested only 15,000 people, and we said we're supposed to, 15,000 people in all of the things we've done. And we said we have 3 months to test 2 million people. And so it means that we have to test 22,000 every day. Now, we are still far away from there. So if we do not know exactly how deep this has run in Kano, then there's problem on our hands, except we really, really ramp it up. So,
and how do we ramp up now? Some have suggested let's involve the religious leaders, the community leaders, but then there is a lockdown in the state. The government only gave perhaps a 2-day period for people to prepare and stock up, seeing that the Ramadan season is still on. How then do we ramp up or to help the government in this battle against the spread of COVID-19 in Kano?
Yes, I think right now the clerics have been engaged. Some of what we had earlier on, we no longer hear. Some of the claims that, oh, Corona does not exist, that we had earlier on, we no longer hear. And when we talk about this, it's not only in Kano that people behave like this thing does not exist, even here in Lagos, Before our friends will start saying, oh, when it comes to Kano, that's when we behave the way. No, even here, people took this disease lightly. Otherwise, those who are training or doing exercise on the highway that we had to call the police to chase them away, they will have known that you do not defeat this pandemic by showing no regard for social distancing, which is another way of saying no, of taking this thing with levity. Indeed. So we are no longer hearing those clerics saying, oh, this thing does not exist. Government is engaging them. The Ganduje administration knows now that, look, it has to defeat this pandemic. Sure. This problem has to be solved. And everyone has jumped in to try to assist Kano to solve a big problem, because whatever it's worth, if Kano does not defeat this pandemic, Nigeria does not defeat it. That is a fact, because it can from there begin to spread to other places. So Kano is part of Nigeria, so it's important for us to do whatever we can to help Kano to defeat this pandemic. Because when Kano defeats it, it is Nigeria that has defeated it. That is the way I see it. And I want to believe that the efforts will continue. We've gone past, at this stage now, we are in the community transmission phase. It's the most difficult phase of all, but we must still give it the best shot. The best shot that we can, or that we have now. Indeed, history will, judge us for the activities we do at this time. We'll take a breather now and return to discuss yet more critical issues on the program. You're watching Journalists Hangout. Stay with us. You're watching Journalists Hangout on TVC News. While businesses and social activities grind to a halt due to the COVID-19 pandemic, some evil mongers continue to perpetrate crime. And in Nigeria here, killer herdsmen and bandits
haven't stopped visiting destruction on many communities despite the lockdown imposed in many states to stop the spread of the coronavirus. In states like Plateau, Katsina, Kaduna and Niger, killer herdsmen and bandits have killed residents even while the lockdown lasted. The worst hit appears to be Katsina, which witnessed the killing of 47 villagers in 3 local government areas. This happened on April the 18th. It also included abduction of 40 people in Foskari. This happened on the 20th of April, still perpetrated by these bandits. In Katsina State, for example, Solomon, we saw the governor saying they are actually facing 2 evils, coronavirus, and before it was the lingering problem of banditry in the state. So the question is, how can a lockdown be on and then these crimes are being perpetrated?
You label them correctly. They are evil mongers. We have thought that there is cessation of hostilities, as it were, in most theaters of war by terrorist groups, by insurgents of this nature, because of the situation in the world, because even they are up against the pandemic because they do not know where it will hit them, even the fighters themselves. So we thought that there is a semblance of, cessation of hostilities. And that had been a part of the talk somehow. Of course, you know that in the Northeast, there's a little bit of plaudits on the side of the Nigerian troops who are quelling and dealing with Boko Haram. And to imagine that the bandits who have other ideas in other parts of the country is not something any one of us really thought about. It's something I find most despicable by anyone that at this time, even they, the fighters, and they're aware, these evil mongers, and they're aware that it makes them vulnerable to the attack of the virus. So what are you fighting when you are going to be killed by a virus? This is not, you're going to lose your life to something that is not going to shoot at you, but it's going to bring you down. So we thought that this is a time for everyone to go into a docile state, as it were. I'm disappointed, and this is a very big challenge for these states. Plateau has been relatively peaceful in a way for some time. Benue too seem to have brought things under control, but this is really despicable for me. I don't have words with which to describe this situation. I feel terrible at this point that this is happening.
Right. So, well, the whole nation is united on this evil of the COVID-19 pandemic. Could this concentration now perhaps have, fueled or given, being a reason behind this banditry we are seeing? We've always had this problem, and you've always, been passionate about this topic. But what could be your thesis now for this problem we are seeing recurring again?
Well, there was no stop to the activities of armed bandits. There was no stop to the activities of killer herdsmen. So, as far as they are concerned, whether there is coronavirus rampaging the world or not, they are doing what they've always done. If you check the timeline, you see that in Kaduna, for example, especially in Chikun local government, there's hardly any week since late last year that the people of Chikun local government have not been attacked. And the bandits have always succeeded. Rarely do we succeed in bringing them under control. Remember even the case of a doctor who built a police post in his community, and they came for his wife and kids. They killed the wife. The children were released later. That was in Kaduna, And in Katsina, the government has done all that it believes it could do to put an end to the attacks by bandits, because these are not insurgents. These are bandits who raid villages so that they can steal people's livestock, so that they can kidnap people and then take money, take ransom in the final analysis. The government has done its best, tried to appease these guys, But the appeasement has not worked. In Kaduna, the governor says, no, I'm not going to get into any peace moves with 2 people. But he too has not been able to stop them. Whether it's on the Abuja-Kaduna highway, or in Chikun local government, or other local governments in Kaduna, especially in southern Kaduna, people are being kidnapped. The Gwari highway, even some days back, nurses, health workers that were going to help in the war against COVID-19 were kidnapped on Gwari highway. Remember that about 2 months ago, even FAN raised the alarm that the road leading to the airport in Kaduna had become unsafe. True. Yes, because that road is not far from the Gwari highway, which in my view is the headquarters of bandits in Kaduna State. So the problem had been there. It's not as if they went on any break. They are not interested in any COVID-19 induced break. They are still active, and it is our responsibility to go and flush them out. I really pity the people of Basari local government, Fasari local government, Safana local government, Dusima, Dandume in Katsina State, because they have lost so many of their people to these bandits. And it appears that even the appeasement has not achieved that aim. Even our soldiers are being killed by these bandits. So in Plateau State, for example, in the Barkinlad area, we've lost 3 soldiers to these bandits. So the same thing in Niger State. Our soldiers were ambushed and killed by bandits. So I want the Chief of Army Staff, yes, it's putting so much accent on the war against Boko Haram in the northeast, but you must remember that the war against bandits is yet to be won. So it should also give tremendous attention to defeating these bandits wherever they are. So
BKO has also, just talked about, the peace moves in Katsina State, and if you don't like this peace moves of allowing these radicals now, or these bandits now, to come back into mainstream society as if they did nothing wrong in the first place, if you don't like that, the hard stance of particular governors, there doesn't actually seem to be an outright, depending on what line of the divide you fall on. But then there's also the concern of these areas still remain largely under-policed. So what is the solution now? What's the best way to address this now? Hard or soft or in between? What's your recipe?
Well, sometimes there are certain procedures, certain rules of engagement in situations like this. Whether when you deal with armed groups, militiamen, terrorists, the stance that is often taken is that you do not negotiate with them. These are criminals in the first place. The stance is you don't negotiate with criminals. And that presupposes also that the state has the capability and the capacity to be able to put them in check, to look for them, get them out, smoke them out, and deal with them. And so you are not ready to negotiate with them. But then also you have to look at your own familiar terrain, the context in which these things operate in your area, and look for a local solution. In some areas, the appeasement mode had been adopted, despite the rule book saying, oh, you don't negotiate. The appeasement mode had been adopted. Now, if appeasement fails, what do? You need to bring out, you have to change that style. You have to, wield the big stick. You need to wield the big hammer if necessary. So we need to look at the distribution of troops. Yes, we know we have a very important battle in the northeast to finish it up. But then it's not like all the soldiers in the country and all the warriors in the country are here in the northeast fighting. We need to look at these things as well. If we defeat Boko Haram in the northeast, and then people in Katsina and Benue and Plateau are not safe, then we have not been able to end insecurity because it's all allied. Boko Haram, the terrorist group, then these bandits, criminals, creating insecurity, around Nigeria. And we really need to stem all of this. So if the appeasement thing is not working out, then maybe we need to evolve a sort of local, at the heart of all of these things is usually intelligence. How you deploy intelligence, how you use intelligence, whether at the very state level or at the very, grassroots level. But then you also need to match them with the force they bring. Because if you cannot match the force they bring, then your people can't be secure.
So, Jide, what would it be for you? Do we perhaps look the way of a state-by-state approach, even though this problem seems to be, common to states now who are not, in the north? If the northeast has its problem, and this zone also seems to still be bedeviled, what do you think?
Yeah, the governors of the Northwest and the governors of the North Central came together at different times. Some of them are even planning to adopt the approach of the Southwest to have internal security outfit like Amotekun as a way of confronting these guys. The truth is, bandits who went as far as kidnapping our president's in-law, they are not people that we should take lightly. And some of them go around with rocket-propelled grenades. They have the weapons. That is why on some occasions they've actually succeeded in killing our security operatives. So we have to realize that, look, the insecurity is still a big problem. So as we try to defeat COVID-19, we should realize that there is perhaps a bigger enemy, over there. Because COVID-19 will go, but insecurity could remain with us. So why don't we give tremendous attention to flushing out these guys and stop the daily attacks on people, especially in Katsina, almost every night. And they attack villages, knowing that it will be difficult for reinforcement to get to them and all that, for them to get help. If we've been to some of those places, the roads are not there. So they will have finished operating before even security operatives will come to their aid, and they come in the night.
So this is a gap that, the perhaps regional security outfit.
Yes, because look, we do not have enough policemen to truly secure our country. So we must find a way, we must find a balance.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a very engaging experience here with you, Babajide, Kolade-Otitoju, and Solomon Ajuziogu. I thank you both very much for your contributions on Journalists Hangout today. And thank you too for watching and keeping us company. Thank you also for the contributions from your end. Join us tomorrow for another episode of the program. You can also watch Journalists Hangout on other platforms showing on your screen and on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. Our feedback channel remains Journalists Hangout at tvcnews.tv.